Welcome back, everybody. And all I can say is on this week's show, we are going to be unleashing some amazing, incredible hip hop history and some of the most detailed hip hop history I've ever heard. I'm going to be talking to an absolute legend in my eyes, and also, one of the early B-boys from 1975, who's a Zulu king, who was also in the Black Spades gang. So we're going to be covering, the Black Spades history. We're also going to be talking about, what it was like living in the Bronx back in the 1970s, and how this, amazing hip hop culture came out of the flames and out of the rubble. So we're going to be chatting about all that. We're going to be talking about Kool Herc, the father of hip hop, and DJ Kool Herc's Herculoids sound system, and also the Herculoids. We're going to be talking about Disco King Mario and the Chuck Chuck City crew. We're going to be talking about, all this amazing history. So whatever you do, I'm going to be uploading this in 4 parts. So this is going to be part 1. And we're going to be covering, the Black Spades and, about what it was like to be, in a gang. And but yeah, please subscribe to this channel. This is part 1. And there's also going to be obviously part 2, part 3, and a part 4. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy this. This is absolutely incredible history being told. So please share this around all the social media sites, because, the stories being told here is, absolutely incredible. So I'm really excited for you to watch this. So please sit back and enjoy the ride. Peace. Lights, camera, action. On this week's show, we have an original b-boy from around 1975 and one of the legendary Zulu kings, who was also a baby spade in the 1970s Black Spades gang, and one of the early members of the Soul Sonic Force MCs, and who also released a rap record in 1981 called Cash Money. We have from London all the way over to the boogie down Bronx, we have the one and the only hugely talented hip-hop legend and scholar, the one and the only Cholly rocking the place.
That is quite an introduction, bro. Quite an introduction. Thank you. How you doing?
Listen, I could sit here for like 20 minutes and introduce you, because you're and anybody watching this interview now, Cholly is absolutely incredible. The history runs deep, from kind of day one. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take it back to the start, back to the root, to kind of, where it all started.
Certainly.
So first 2 questions, Cholly, that, I always ask is, whereabouts are you from, and what was it like growing up, as a kid?
Okay, I am born and raised in the Bronx, New York, in the northeast section of the Bronx, which is called the uptown section of the Bronx. And that's an important distinction. I was raised in Gun Hill Projects, Gun Hill houses, which is in the northeast section of the Bronx. And if you know anything about the Bronx, the northeast section of the Bronx, particularly where I'm at, is close to the division line of the Bronx and Westchester County. You know what I mean? So I can actually, on a good day, walk into Westchester County. Mount Vernon is right next to us. Yonkers is another direction. New Rochelle is another. So on any good given day, you can walk right into Westchester County. So basically, the Northeast Bronx is one of the borders of the Bronx. So that's where I grew up at. I'm born and raised there.
And Cholly, as like a little kid, was you playing games like Scully, Spongeball and Stickball, all those kind of games?
Of course. Skelsies, Skelsies. Loadies, some people call it Loadies, depending on where you come from. But Skelsies, Off the Stoop, Handball, Ace, King, Queen, or Box Ball. I mean, we played all the games, Tag. We played all the typical games that kids would play. I mean, I had a very normal childhood. You know what I mean? It was pretty normal. 2 parents. I was adopted at a very early age, at like 5 days old. So I was raised in an adopted family, basically. And my childhood was fairly idyllic. Some issues going on in the household, but outside of that, you know, my childhood was pretty normal. You know, we played all the games that a regular kid would play. And the Northeast Bronx it's really important to understand the Bronx in and of itself, particularly where the narrative of hip hop is concerned. Because of course the narrative tells you that it's born out of the poverty of the South Bronx, all of these wonderful things. And there's a bit of an exaggeration to that in the sense that it was in all different parts of the Bronx, because I think people and your Londoners definitely should know this, because I think the perception is that the Bronx is full of decayed, burned down buildings during that era and everything. And there was a part of the Bronx that was like that, the South Bronx. But the Northeast Bronx, where I grew up, was very residential. It was a very mixed population, probably a lot more white people at the time. You know, they hadn't all gone into the exodus, the white flight yet. So it was a heavily mixed neighborhood, a lot of Black working class people, Italians, Irish, Jewish. And so, of course, I went to school with all those people. I'm what they call an academically precocious or gifted kid. So, you know, I was in classes for gifted kids. And as a result, my classes were very mixed and everything. So I grew up with a very eclectic set of friends. You know, my friends in the housing crowd, of course. And even where I lived in the housing development, there were Black kids, white kids, Hispanic kids. You know, it was a mixture. And we all played together and, you know,
yeah, real kind of quite kind of multicultural. Yeah, everybody kind of blending in, you know, as one.
Absolutely. It was very multicultural. And I think that's an important piece of my particular upbringing, because it allowed me to be pretty diverse, you know, in my taste and what I was exposed to, you know, those kind of things.
Because back in London, you know, especially like in the 60s and the 70s, it was quite kind of divided, where you have pockets or areas where, you know, there'd be like the Afro-Caribbean community, the Asian community, the Indian
Sure.
community, and the white community, where now, you know, London is just a melting pot of culture, you know, everybody, you know, living as one.
Yes. And I mean, there's parts of, contrary to what people think, New York has those pockets too. You know what I mean? It has those pockets, de facto segregation kind of stuff, you know. But the Northeast Bronx, like I said, and we had some of that as well. But the area I was in was pretty mixed.
Now, going back to New York, I mean, between the years of, say, 1969 to 1974, the city lost something like over 500,000 manufacturing jobs. And there was like over 1 million households basically on welfare by 1975. And, you know, the crime rate kind of tripled. I mean, the murder rate went up. You know, it was also like sky high. And, you know, as you said, spread to some parts of the Bronx. You know, it was burning down. What was the reason why the fires were started? Was it to do with the landlords?
The fires in the South Bronx, yeah, that had to do with landlords, white flight. A lot of things had taken place with regards to neighborhoods, buildings of the Cross Bronx Expressway, which split up neighborhoods, the influx of Black and Hispanic residents, and a lot of those neighborhoods that have been at one point predominantly white, the Grand Concourse, places like that. Those whites started moving away, moving into the suburbs, moving into Westchester County, and property values went down. So the landlords, you know, I mean, wanting to make money, they decided to burn down properties and collect the insurance. And so they would have different groups, particularly a lot of the gangs during the era. That was a lot of the influx of the gangs during that particular period of time that you're talking about. The Black Spades being one of them, of course. A lot of those gangs, they would pay them to burn down the buildings and everything like that and collect the rent money. So that is what really happened in the South Bronx. That was very exclusive to the South Bronx. That didn't happen up in the North Bronx. And that's an important distinction. Like I said, where I grew up, there's private houses, residences, you know. We had housing developments. Obviously, I lived in one. But even the housing developments, with the exception of Edenwald houses, the housing developments were for working class families. And so it was a different mindset. It wasn't the stereotypical definition that you would have of a housing project. You know, mean, that a lot more now today.
I mean, Cholly, you know, looking back on it, you know, it must have been absolutely soul destroying for, you know, those hardworking parents out there trying to bring your kids up when you're being engulfed in all this kind of rubble and flames. It must have been, you know, it must have been an absolute nightmare.
Well, I'm sure down there it was.
Mm.
Well, probably down there, I'm sure it was. Uptown, like I said, it was very residential. So we weren't experiencing any of that. And I think it's really important for people to understand that because, again, the stereotype that people from around other parts of the country and other parts of the globe, such as London and what have you, have is that the South Bronx or the Bronx itself, you know, they always say the Bronx is burning. But that, like I said, was one particular area of the South Bronx. And of course, the narrative of hip hop is that out of this rubble and everything was spawned this creative genius of hip hop and everything like that. And you know,
100%.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And the reality really is, it didn't start in the South Bronx because where Herc is, Cedric Avenue, that's the West Bronx. They were pretty residential still where he was at, Cedric Avenue. You know what I mean? So, like I said, the narrative, a lot of it took off in the South Bronx. It was an important piece, but its real foundation when we talk about Herc was a West Indian immigrant from a working class family in the West Bronx. Okay, so Cedric Avenue, that's where that is. That's like southwest, just like toward the borderline, you could say.
And it wasn't.
As you go further, yeah.
At the time, I don't think it was actually too bad an area there as well, was it? 1520 Cedric around there wasn't like a really kind of bad area.
It wasn't a bad area at all.
Mm.
It wasn't at all. That's the point. It really wasn't. You know what I mean? So, like I said, the narrative is very romantic. Truth of it is a little more pedestrian. You know.
And Cholly, would you say that kind of like music and dancing was kind of like a release to get you through those, you know, those really kind of hard times?
I guess for some people. For me, I wasn't experiencing hard times. I think for me, I was a kid, like I told you, I was very academically gifted, but I was also, I guess I had a lot of what a friend of mine, Charlie Breland, calls misguided fire. So, you know, I always had behavioral stuff. I was always very, you know, out there and had a restless energy, I guess you could say. And because of that, I gravitated and other things. I think a lot of times kids, you know, when you're feeling bullied or certainly other self-esteem issues, you gravitate towards things that will release your energy. And so that's what it was for me. And so behaviorally, I was always like with the bad kids, I guess you could say, even though I was in the class with gifted kids and all those different kinds of things. So that's what drove my energy. And eventually that channeled into the music and the dancing and the gang life.
Yeah, of course.
That's really for me.
I was going to talk about gang culture. You know, gang culture has always been, you know, part of New York. I mean, it dates back to like the 18th century. You had like gangs like the Bowery Boys, the Eastman Gang, the Dead Rabbits, the 40 Thieves, the Swamp Angels. But, you know, in the 1970s, you know, it was absolutely huge throughout New York. I mean, I'm sure in the Bronx, you had gangs like the Ghetto Brothers, Imperial Bachelors, Savage Skulls, Savage Nomads, the Dirty Ones. And then, you know, you also had the Savage Seven that later become the Black Spades, which, you know, you was a member of. You was a baby Spade.
Yes.
So how did that come about? You was living in like Gun Hill area. So what made you sort of go down? Was it WildStyle? Was that first division?
Well, Bronxville is the first division. That's where the Spades were founded.
Mm.
Okay. But the Black Spades eventually became the largest street gang at that time in New York City. Okay. And so it was in all areas of the Bronx. There were divisions throughout the Bronx. There was some in Manhattan and Harlem. There's a division in Westchester, and I believe a division in Brooklyn as well. So, you know, we were all over the place. So the division that I was connected to was the 22nd Division, which was on Gun Hill Road. To 11th Street in that area. And a lot of those guys older than me, and, you know, they obviously became close friends. They're like family to me, you know. They were in other gangs that the Spades absorbed, like the Black Devils was one of the gangs that was up there. The Black Saigons was another. There was a gang in Edenwald called Intercrime that was its own. They stayed right where they were, and they were not absorbed by anybody. And they were probably the chief rivals of the Spades at that time. They had a crew called the Uptown Organization. They had white gangs up there as well. The White Angels, the White Assassins, factions of the Golden Guineas, which were from Arthur Avenue in the Bronx. The Ministers, which were from Parkchester. The Henchmen, which were over by Villa Avenue, near where I went to school, Bronx High School of Science, over in that area. So there were gangs all over the area. You know what I mean? So I just happened to be a part of the Black Spades gang where that division, the 22nd Division, was in the Gun Hill Road area. And I was introduced to it in junior high school in 1973. They had two gangs. It was Black Spades and the Peacemakers. And I always tell this story. One of the things that really set the gangs off in the Bronx was the premiere of West Side Story, the television premiere of it. Okay. West Side Story, obviously famous play, and then Broadway musical, and then a movie and everything like that. But as you know, at that time, they didn't have cable, and everything came on broadcast television. So West Side Story hadn't been placed on broadcast television yet. So around 1969, 1970 was the first television premiere of West Side Story. And I vividly remember, as kids, I was still in elementary school at the time, PS 41 in the Bronx. And everybody watched West Side Story, right? And it was in two parts. The next day, all the young kids coming out, yo, we're Sharks, we're the Jets, And it was a play thing, but I remember distinctly the gang, particularly up in the Uptown area, really taking off right around that time, okay? And so, they showed West Side Story again around 1972, 73. And again, same thing happened. People coming, and there were already gangs up there, the Peacemakers and the Black Spades, like I said, the Saigons, the Black Saigons and the Black Devils, all of that. So how I got introduced is that, like I told you, the people I hung with already, even though I was in SP class, gifted class, and all that kind of stuff, all my energy, I guess, brought me to my friends, and I would get in trouble, and I'd be in detention all the time. So that's how I met all of them. And the guy who really first came at me was a friend of mine named Gerard Foote, and he was president of the Baby Peacemakers up in that area. And then my boy, who I grew up with in elementary school, he was Supreme Vice President of the Peacemakers, named Dietrich McCoy. And so, we grew up together, new friends and everything. Some of my other friends, my man Stewie Creekmore, they were Peacemakers. Some of my friends were Spades. My man Anthony Holden, Little Man, all of them were Spades. A lot of my friends were Baby Spades and everything like that. And so Gerard had come at me and he said, yo, Cholly, why don't you be a baby maker? And I had very strict parents, particularly my father, who not only was strict, by today's standards, he'd be abusive.
Is it that was in the day where you get the slipper?
I got a lot more than a slipper.
Yeah.
You got, and yeah. And my father was very, you know what I mean? So I was always very rebellious and getting these beatings and everything like that. So I had a lot of fear of him, physical fear, but I was always still doing my thing, running around. So he asked me to be a baby maker, and I was like, well, I don't know about, think about that and everything like that. But I was already hanging with my friends who were Baby Spades, my boy Lloyd Johnson and others. And I told you, my man Anthony Holden, Little Man. And so by just naturally, I wound up gravitating towards the Black Spades, and that's how I became a Baby Spade.
And would you, Cholly, would you say that, the gangs were kind of formed to protect their communities from, like dealers and, and they was trying to clean their kind of community up?
Yeah, in some of the areas, that definitely was the issue. The Black Spades, for example, they were really created to protect the community and to protect each other from already existing Hispanic gangs and some of the white people up there, because they were in an area, Bronxdale is in also an area in transition. It's like the border of South Bronx. It's similar to the North Bronx. Like you had a mixture of the housing developments plus residential communities. You still had a lot of white people up there. You know what I mean? And so as a form of protection, that's how the Savage Seven, who eventually became the Black Spades, were formed. They were protecting themselves against the white kids who were trying to jump them and beat them up in the Castle Hill area, a place like that. The Hispanic gangs, one of the stories that my boy, Bam Bam, who was Supreme Spokesman, Supreme Warlord of the Black Spades, he's part of the council, one of the... And he always talked about him and my man Peter Williams. All right, Khalid. These are all founding members of the Spades, and they're still very close to me to this day. And one of the reasons that it started was that they were in junior high school 123, the legendary 123, okay? And major venue of hip hop, as you know, or what came to be known as hip hop. And the thing was, they had a gang there that was making them pay a nickel to go up the stairs to class. And they got tired of that. So they formed the Savage Seven to protect themselves about, not paying this nickel.
And, wow. I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah. That's part of the story. Yeah. And also like protecting themselves against the white guys who were jumping them going to school. They said they had a family of white guys who, when they would pass the corner, would chase them and try to jump, So it was all of those protections. And that's how it started. The other part, and my man Khalil talks about it, because the two people who founded it were Peter Williams and David Brockington. David Brockington is the actual founder of the Black Spades, or the Savage Seven, and then became the Black Spades. And they were also connected to the Nation of Islam. So a lot of their focus and their inspiration came from the Nation of Islam, the Black nationalism movement, and everything of that nature. So that was a lot of their energy as well. And so that's what really started all those things. And those are things you can ask them and they'll tell you.
Cholly, I was going to say to you as well, was there kind of like an initiation to get into the gang? Did you have to have like a punch up on the cobbles?
Well, some did. Yeah, you had to walk the line.
Walk the line, yeah.
You had to walk the line. All right. And like I said, when I got into Baby Spades, I didn't necessarily go through all that. I had a little bit, because you know what it was for me? Like I said, the people I hung with, and I had a reputation, like I was this smart kid that could fight. And it came out of necessity, because when I was a kid, I used to get picked on a lot in Gunny when I was a little kid. I was really smart, I was nerdy. You know what I mean? I like to do things, read, and we also go through a lot of stuff in our own community where coloration is a huge thing. So I was a dark-skinned kid with natty hair, I like to read, I was a sensitive kid, so people used to pick on me and everything like that. And I think when kids are picked on or bullied, what they call bullying today, you do one of three things. You become depressed and whatever, you withdraw, or you deal with it healthfully, I guess, or you go in the opposite direction, you learn how to fight, and you become the person who's terrorized. So I wound up with choice 3, and I wound up learning how to fight really well. And so I wound up being this kid who was really smart and everything, and people made fun, but they wasn't gonna mess with me because I could fight.
And you had backup from the crew as well.
Well, that came later. That came
right.
I mean, being in the crew was because of the fact that I could fight. I could take care of myself. So again, they liked me. They gravitated towards me, and that's how I became a Baby Spade. That's the story.
And Cholly, what was kind of like the average age, of a gang member? Was it kind of like, sort of 8 years old up to kind of late teens?
Well, 8 is really young. I wouldn't say 8 years old. As Baby Spades, I mean, the divisions were Baby Spades, Young Spades, Black Spades. The Baby Spades were probably like 13 and under, 12 and under, things like that. Young Spades were probably like 15 to 17. The Black Spades were like maybe 17 to 21, 22, 23, somewhere like that. But no older than that. You know what I mean? And I say that because that's a very strong distinction from gangs of today, where you have grown men, who have been in for life. Out in Cali, you have gangs, OGs who have been down since they were 8, 9 years old, and family members, their second and third generation, things like that. We were youth gangs, and our parents weren't involved with that. In fact, like as I told you, when my father became found I had become a Black Spade, that was probably one of the hard beatings that I got. You know what I mean? And it didn't stop me from being a Spade. It just made me be very, sneaky around it. You know what I mean? But I remember that my father especially, he had a lot of issues too with him, control issues and everything like that. So it's just not just about the gang stuff. It was also with him about control. And that really played into a lot of things later on with me and him and everything. So the age range, probably 11 10, youngest, and like I said, as old as 22, 23, but not grown adult men like you see in today's world with in Chicago and, you know, in Cali and everything. It's very different.
Yeah, it's quite a bit younger. And Cholly, would you say was there many Puerto Ricans and white people in the Black Spades as well?
There were a lot of Puerto Ricans in the Black Spades, yeah. And white people. The two white people, White Tom, who was down by the first division, and my man Berkey, who was in the 18th division, but he used to be uptown by us. And those were two white guys who were Black Spades. Officially, they were Black Spades, without a doubt. Yeah.
And can you Cholly, can you kind of tell me, you know, how the chapter and the divisions work?
You know, I mean, there were maybe about 70 some odd divisions of the Black Spades.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? I was in the second division. You know, you had, like, for example, the first division, which is where the council was. That's Bronxdale. They were people who founded it. So all the Supremes were there, like my man Monk, Supreme President of them. Because David Brockton got older, he had a kid, you know, was moving in other directions. He was going other things. So then he gave the presidency to Monk. So Monk was Supreme President, Guru, Supreme Vice President. You had a president, vice president. You had a warlord and a spokesperson. And of course, you had the people underneath who were the members. And that's kind of how the hierarchy and the structure worked. You know, and pretty much most gangs were that way. And of course, we had divisions. I'm sure there were other gangs who had chapters, but we had divisions. And,
you know, going to the fashion, I mean, the fashion with the gang culture then, it was a lot of kind of like the cut sleeves and the motorbike boots and a lot of denim. How did that kind of come around? Obviously, it was probably was it from like the Outlaws and the Hells Angels back in the, you know, back in the I think it's the 40s or the 50s?
I would imagine that's where it derived from. I mean, you know, it is called outlaw. You know, you either just outlaw where you're wearing colors and spade boots or MCs, right? Or the underground. Underground is like, you might not be flying colors, but it's known that you're a member. You know, and a lot of that was by necessity, particularly because of the police and the youth gang task force. You know, and it also allowed us, particularly as baby spades, it allowed us to move around and do things with and for the young and the Black Spades, you know, without necessarily being detected, so to speak. So that's kind of how that whole thing goes. But yeah, with the cut sleeve, the denim jackets, you got your colors, okay, what you call colors.
Yeah, the colors, yeah.
And so you had colors, and they could be very fancy, like with fur around the collar, you know, and your emblem on the back. So that's how that works.
And have you got any idea where the name come from and the logo? Obviously, the Black Spade is from the playing cards, isn't it? The
I guess so. That would be something you'd have to ask the older members, because, like I said, it was already in existence when I got down, so I couldn't tell you where it came from. But I started, like I told you, started as a 7 because there was 7 of them, and they started. Where they got the name from, I can't tell you. I have to ask. Gotta ask Bam Bam or Pete that.
You should, yeah, because it'd be quite interesting. And
yeah.
And Cholly, I was going to say to you as well, there was a dance as well. I think it was called the Spade Dance.
The Spade Dance, yes.
What was that like?
The Spade Dance is a dance like, if you hear a lot of Puerto Ricans talk about outlaw rock or rocking and everything like that, it's all same stuff. And it's very elaborate moves with spinning, not spinning on the floor like a b-boy, but the burning era kind of feeds out of that. And, you know, a lot of stomping, particularly with the boots. You know, there's a lot of stomping because
the stomps, the stomping noise with the boots on, yeah.
Yeah, you're mixing that in with dance steps and everything like that, and that's the Spade Dance.
Cholly, you're itching to do a bit, aren't you? I can see you.
Yeah, I can't dance like that anymore. I have an artificial knee. I have a lot, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I'm older now, but yeah, it's a lot of rocking, and I you know, not standing. It's a lot of bouncing and stomping and spinning around, and it's to the beat of the music, a lot of funk music, and particularly a song, Soul Power by James Brown, which was the Spade anthem. So, you know, it's like, what we need, soul power, but instead of saying soul power, what we need, spade power. We got to have spade power. Spade power. And so it's like soul power, spade power, soul power, power to the people, power to the spade. So it's a whole anthem to it, and, you know, the dancing to it and everything like that. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And Cholly, also, you know, obviously the Latin hustle was a big dance, you know, in the early 70s as well. Was you rocking the Latin hustle dance?
I can hustle. So I'm a dancer. That really comes later on you know, more in my Zulu King teenage years and everything like that. The cat who's really the authority on that is a friend of mine, my man Willie Estrada. But because the Latin Hustle was really a Hispanic thing, it was a Puerto Rican thing. You know what I mean? And they really popularized it. And of course, the Latin Hustle kind of took a life of its own, where it got into the mainstream and the whites started doing the hustle. But it really begins with a lot of the Puerto Ricans doing their thing. And like I said, cats like Willie Estrada, Marine Boy, who was a gang member. They talk about outlaw rock and all those things, and really being the pioneers of the Latin hustle. So that's it.
Yeah, I interviewed Willie. He's got amazing history. I interviewed Willie about 2 months back, and he was telling me about the Latin hustle. Yeah,
Willie's a friend.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And also the disco era as well was absolutely, you know, massive. And you had legendary DJs like Grandmaster Flowers, DJ Francis Grasso, who I think was the first DJ to basically beat match 2 records together. Did you get into the disco dance as well?
Yeah, I'm a dancer.
Yeah, so you cover all styles of dance.
Yeah, so, you know, and so I could hustle as well as be a b-boy, but they were different venues, and that's an important thing, and that's the delineation that really separates and defines hip-hop, because at the same time, parallel, you had disco. It's like the antithesis to disco, you know, because disco was an older crowd. Even the kids who are our age, who were younger and they wanted to feel more sophisticated, they wore their shoes. The girls wanted fly guys and everything like that, and they went to the disco and the clubs, and you wore shoes, and you know, it's a different atmosphere. And the DJs like Flowers, Maboya, they talk about
Francis Grasso,
right? PDJ Jones. They were all disco DJs. They played for an older crowd, and even being younger, because like I said, by that age I'm like 15, you know, and everything like that. And when I wore shoes, and I went to Bronx High School of Science, as you know, and so I had a lot of friends. So we went to discos and clubs and danced and hustled and everything like that. But I'm a b-boy. You know, and that's a whole other thing.
Oh, big time, and I can't wait to talk to you about b-boying.
Yeah, because b-boying is where hip hop comes out of. Okay?
Yeah, without a doubt.
That's important, because you get a lot of people who wanted nothing to do with any of that. The disco crowd, the disco DJs, who now talk about they want to be included as fathers and forefathers of hip hop and all that kind of. That's nice, but you really didn't want anything to do with us. You know what I mean? And I get it. We were like young, we were thuggish, we were as they look at it. You know what I mean? We were more gang affiliated and all those different kinds of things. We wore sneakers, and they didn't want that in their particular venues. So, you know, but that's important, because that is the line of demarcation that creates the culture of hip hop.
And it was very kind of, at the time, still quite underground, where disco was absolutely massive.
Yeah, hip hop. People, I mean, what came to be known as hip hop. It was underground is a good way to put it. People didn't, I mean, unless you were involved in it. And it was pretty much a thing in the Black community. And saying in the Black community, there were Puerto Ricans with us too, because we all hung together. But it was very much a thing that started more in the Black community, and with Puerto Ricans who were with us, like I said, somebody like Tex DJ Hollywood, who was a hip hop DJ. He's Puerto Rican. David Santiago, he was a Black Spade. You know what I mean? Like I said, we had a lot of Puerto Ricans that were Black Spades, quite a number. So, you know, again, it was always that mixing, we all hung together, and that's why I get really annoyed with that whole people try to separate and do this. I have a problem. I don't like that. We're all down together. You know, it was not a. You know, and you had older Puerto Ricans who tried to separate, like they would talk to young Puerto Ricans, what you doing with those Cocolos, those Morenos, things like that, you know, but we didn't see it like that. They were with us, we were with them, you know, we just were together, we hung out together, we were friends.
Yeah, it was a unity, and you was as one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And you know, that's the way that's the way it should be. We shouldn't be divided.
True, but you know, we are. So it, you know what I mean?
Well, some of us are.
That's just the way it is. Yeah, some people are.
Yeah, but yeah.
That there are those who want to try and do that. You know what I mean?
Right, now I hope you enjoyed that. That was absolutely incredible history being told for part 1. And whatever you do, please subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be unleashing part 2 part 3 and part 4 very soon. So please subscribe and check out the other parts. Peace.